welcome to episode 28 of Rudy's Bench. My name is Chris Schumerth. Come for sports and stay for people. We're going to talk football today as the Irish are in New Orleans preparing for the Sugar Bowl. And with me is Jeremy Greenlee, who I went to college with, and Jhett Garrett, who's been on Rudy's Bench before a while back, has some Indiana conflicted allegiances. We'll talk about that. But the Irish won fairly easily against Indiana in round one of the playoff. We've never been to this point in this kind of postseason format before, so it's all new. It's fun, in my opinion, although there's been lots of noise, particularly about Indiana and SMU and some of the teams that haven't fared particularly well in this playoff so far. I think a lot of that is nonsense. But let's dive right in. Jeremy played football in college, at least a little bit, grew up in northern Indiana. Jhett is an aspiring journalist. Thank you guys both for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Excited to talk about the game.
Very excited.
I had reached out to both of you because one of you I ran into at the first round of the playoff in South Bend, and one of you I just saw posting some pictures. So why don't we start with that game against Indiana? So first of all, we've established before the podcast, you're both reversible jackets. What that means is that you've historically cheered for Notre Dame in the fall for football, and you've cheered for IU basketball in the winter. Why don't we start with Jeremy? To what degree does that color your experience at the game in the first round of the playoff, if at all?
Oh, yeah, IU basketball, Notre Dame football. Growing up in Indiana, there were basically two teams you could watch on TV. It wasn't like today where you can watch any sport of any college you want. That's basically what we had to watch on TV. And so that's how I fell in love with the Hoosier basketball and IU football. But super excited about this game. I was disappointed that I couldn't cheer for the Hoosiers in the playoffs when they were matched up with Notre Dame, but no conflict as far as which team I was going to cheer for in this game because it's Notre Dame football, number one.
So you're pretty well able to compartmentalize in the present the fandom, which originated at a time when, you didn't choose your emotional investment, basically. Is that kind of an accurate description of how this works?
Yeah, and I think you get a lot of flack on it, especially from my IU buddies that are only IU. They're like, how can you cheer for Notre Dame? Even one of my cousins was harassing me because I was in head-to-toe IU gear at Thanksgiving because there's an IU game on, but it's Notre Dame football. And they don't play in the same conference. They're not rivals. They rarely play each other in football. I think it's fair to be a fan of both.
So I saw that they had last played in 1991. I think they've got another game on the schedule kind of several years from now, although I talked to some IU friends in the last episode who aren't convinced that that game is actually going to get played. But Jhett, does it work similarly for you in terms of when you see these two teams playing together, you're able to stick to the one sport versus the other sport allegiance?
It was weird because, so for one, covering Indiana football, I got to hide behind I'm an unbiased beat reporter. I've got no dog in the fight. I'm just going to the game to write. So I got to hide behind that a little bit. But internally, as a fan, I think you could have had any opinion before that game about who you wanted to win. But once you step foot on campus and in the stadium, you're just pulled to one side. You really are. You want to be it. You want to be Notre Dame. You want to be a student there. You want to be a player. You want to be a part of it. So as far as conflicted, I wasn't necessarily conflicted. I just got to hide behind the unbiased beat reporter. But I will say, I think a lot of my friends knew who I was pulling for. And being an IU student, I also got it as well. How can you go to IU and not cheer for them? Listen, it sucks. I would have cheered for IU against any other team in college football. It just happened to be the luck of the draw. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this Notre Dame football team. There was no way I could cheer against them.
This IU team in particular, I thought, and I don't have the same reversible jacket fandom. I didn't grow up with that in the same way that you guys did, although I don't have any reason to hate IU or whatever. And the fact that Notre Dame football hasn't played them historically, at least in my lifetime, with the exception of that game we just mentioned. Yeah, I just don't have a strong resentment, or I don't feel like oppositional toward IU. Have talked to some friends out of state who cheer for other teams, in other places, they've learned about this concept and they think it's insane. I don't blame them for that. It is interesting. But I will say, just as a fan of the sport, this Cignetti team was fun to pull for and pay attention to. And so I was disappointed. I didn't want Notre Dame to have to play IU. I would have loved to have seen IU get a shot at someone else. We'll talk about the atmosphere. But before we do that, why don't, Jhett, let's talk a little bit more about this fan journalistic objectivity tension as well. I'm doing it right now. So I have aspirations in journalism, in writing. I'm doing a podcast, but you grow up as a fan. And I think probably most journalists who get involved in sport get involved because they loved it in some kind of way. And maybe they end up covering a team that they loved, or maybe they don't, or maybe it's a mix. And I'm old enough now where I do feel like I can play those different hats, roles. I can be at a game and maybe my insides are screaming something, but that doesn't mean that I need to react.
Like, I'll sit there, I'll be quiet, whatever. And even during the game, I was still fine. I think I got a little reaction when I think Bo Collins might have dropped the pass. And then when Mills went down, obviously, which we'll talk about, when Rylie Mills went down, that was like, an internal panic. And I became a little external of, this is not good. This is not good, under my breath, of course. But yeah, I felt like all in all, I kept it together as an unbiased, right down the middle. I didn't think, I thought I kept my cards close to my chest.
Are you still writing for which Notre Dame publication?
The Irish Tribune. Yeah.
Okay.
So I still write, yeah.
So that night you were covering IU for an IU publication, but did you also then write something for the Notre Dame publication?
I did not. I write basketball for the Irish Tribune. Okay. So it's like I didn't have, as far as writing publications go, I didn't have to go to one side or the other either for that.
But you couldn't, this is this journalism, objectivity. I think fairness is the right word. Like, you're never objective about pretty much anything in this life. But I do think you could write, theoretically, you could be covering IU, you could write a thing that is about IU, and then the next day you could write your Notre Dame thing from a totally different angle. And both pieces, the person who's reading it, not necessarily be able to tell who you wanted to win or whatever. Like, we have that capability within us. However, fandom is not that, right? Fandom is about passion. Fandom is about enthusiasm. And one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about was just the energy in the air. And Jeremy, you probably have a much better sense of that than Jhett and I do from that game, although all three of us were there. I'm sure you've been to other Notre Dame games in the past. How would you compare it to, the noise, the excitement?
Yeah, my parents have season tickets, so I get to go to 3 or 4 games every year. I've been doing that for, a long time. Going back to the 2012 team, we had a lot of big time games that season, being undefeated. So I've been to a lot of big games. Was at the Ohio State game last year, which was really rocking the entire game. But this one was really, I felt like even 45 minutes before the game even started, the stadium was packed already. It was hard to get in because people were arriving early. People were loud, booing IU, like way more than typically. Typically, it's like maybe a quarter full or whatever that time of the game, and people are rolling in. But people were ready to go, and people were standing the entire game. There was no sitting down, nobody complaining about being down up front, that kind of thing. So it was probably the best atmosphere of a football game I've ever been to. Ohio State was close, I would say, and maybe towards the end of the game, fourth quarter, because that game was really close the whole way. Maybe Ohio State it was a pretty exciting game throughout. IU got a little slow in the third quarter, but the crowd was really into it the entire time, even being up so much. So it was probably my favorite game ever to be at.
So that was the game where 10 guys in the field late when they scored, right?
Yeah. And my parents' season tickets, they're right on that corner on the goal line, and so I got a front row seat to that end of that game. So that was pretty brutal.
What you mentioned the 2012 season. If you've attended that many games consistently over a long period of time, what are some of your favorite games?
There's let's see. This was probably my favorite game. The Ohio State game was a lot of fun. Even this year, the Florida State game was really loud. Even though it was a blowout, there was some excitement this year. favorite game to watch, and I wasn't at this game, but the USC Notre Dame game, that was, I can't remember
2005.
that was big time game. That's probably the one that's burned into my memory most from my childhood. But the Stanford game that year, 2012, that was a great game, close right to the end.
Yeah, I'm a little
Yeah.
jealous you were at that one. Okay.
Yeah. That
So
was a
what do
fun
you
one.
think? We mentioned reversible jackets, another term that gets thrown around for Notre Dame Stadium and for the experience of a game in South Bend. It has this aura around history and tradition, and there are other spots on campus to go to. But there's also this sense that when opposing Georgia comes to mind in whatever year that was, actually.
Yeah, I was at that game too. That was a
I was
blast.
at
That
that
was a
one.
great game too. Really
That
frustrating because of some of the officiating I thought really hurt us in that game. That game could have gone the other way.
yeah, there is the sense that the right traveling fan base can potentially take over a game in South Bend, although it certainly did not appear to be that way with IU. And in fact, my IU friends were complaining that I think they only had access to like 3,500 tickets, their season ticket holders down there, and they weren't able to get their playoff ticket because it just was too expensive. The term is wine and cheese club. Do you think that's a fair criticism of Notre Dame Stadium typically?
Maybe, I don't know, but going back to your point about the crowd and the home field advantage, which Notre Dame's done a really good job since that Georgia game of trying to prevent other opposing teams from taking over. This is what the first ever home playoff game hosted at Notre Dame Stadium in the history. It doesn't get any better than that. I was that morning, I was pumped. I was supposed to work that day, but I couldn't get anything done. I was really just watching highlights and getting ready. And this is what college football should all be about. I love the idea of having these home playoff games. I hope that they expand it in the future so that we have the quarterfinals as well as home playoff games. So it was, yeah, I think it's great for college football in general.
And does your family, you said you have the season tickets, do you guys also set up a tailgate or anything, or do you?
Oh yeah, it's right on campus, right next to the stadium. So we're out there. I got my Starlink set up, so we got high-speed internet. We have TV there, and yeah, it's fun. I'm adding a grill next year, so yeah, it's a blast. And it was packed Friday. We arrived there 3 hours early, and we didn't get good spots. There were a lot of people there. I was surprised.
I was going to ask, did it seem comparable to, obviously it was on Friday too. And let's be honest, it was way colder than it usually is. And I think it was still manageable. What was it, like 25, 30 degrees? Yeah. But that's different than being out there when it's 65 for sure.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot more people there than normal this late in the year, which for obvious reasons. But yeah.
I looked and it was like, it was historically, I think it was like the fourth time that Notre Dame Stadium has hosted a game in December. So it's not, with all that history, it's not like it's happened that many times. Again, Jhett, you and I had a little bit different experience, but what was your sense of the atmosphere?
Notre Dame Stadium as a whole already has this aura about it. We got the chance to go down in like the stands and be very close to the field before the game. And it's just a feeling that I only have ever felt at Notre Dame Stadium and on the Notre Dame campus as well. So I think the atmosphere as a whole is already one of the best in college football. But then you add that college football playoff logo to the field, and you get these fans in there that paid $1,000 for their ticket. These are the diehards. These are the people that want to be on their feet for every second of this game. And the towels as well. I think Notre Dame should continue to do the towels and things like that for fans, just get the fans more involved. They had the hype videos playing on the screen. I really think that I didn't get as good of a gauge on the atmosphere as much as Jeremy would have, but I still thought that it was very good. It was loud. Fans were jumping around. They were into the game. I thought the atmosphere was very good, even from up top.
Yeah, it was loud. First down, second down, third down. It didn't matter. It was when Indiana was on offense, it was rocking.
So I don't know about you guys, but I didn't really know what to expect in that game. And some of it you could say was IU's schedule. But even after Ohio State, they still just beat the heck out of teams. So I felt in the beginning that Notre Dame could lose to IU or they could win the whole thing and anything in between, of course. Now, I will say, if you put a gun to my head and said, tell me what's going to happen in this game, I think basically what happened is what I thought was going to happen, is that Notre Dame was going to control the line of scrimmage. And because they were controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, IU couldn't really move the football. I wouldn't say Notre Dame had a great running night, but of course they break the 98-yard run early in the game, which just changes the feel of the whole thing immediately. And of course, Xavier Watts picked off a pass right before that, and IU was on the 17, 18-yard line. So they could have scored first in that game. Not impossible to imagine. At least a field goal, if not a touchdown. But what did you guys think? Notre Dame didn't light it up in terms of throwing the ball, as they haven't all season long. But of course, they hit the late one to Faison. And I thought that was Faison's best game of the year, which made me think it was the healthiest that Faison has been. Either one of you, what did you guys think of the substance of what happened on the field?
I thought it'd be a pretty good matchup. One of the things that I was disappointed is I would have loved to seen like a Clemson or one of these SEC teams come up and play in this weather. So I was a little disappointed about that. But with the weather, that tends to be an equalizer. I thought Notre Dame had more talent all around, but IU's a good team, and I was pretty concerned about turnovers and that kind of thing. We did a good job with that. And so I thought
other than that first throw of the game.
Yeah. But I thought if we didn't lose the turnover battle by a significant amount, it would be what we saw. But yeah, our secondary, they are lights out this year, and which is something we haven't had before. So it's nice to have that.
It has certainly been a while, and there's been like a couple guys here and there, right? Like Julian Love was just a lockdown corner. We could come up with some other examples. Notre Dame's had some good safeties over the years. But I think a group that's this good, corner safety, I don't remember when that was. And that's, by the way, with Jaden Mickey having departed, with Benjamin Morrison now injured, and you still feel that strong about that group. Yeah, they've been pretty impressive. Jhett, what did you notice about the game?
This game was coming down to the physicality. It was going to be who's going to be more physical up front. That was my thing before the game, because I wasn't giving a prediction. A lot of friends would ask me, who do you think is going to win? And I say, listen, I'm not giving a pick. But where's the game won? I say it's won physically. It's going to be one up front, offense and defensive lines. And I said, if it comes down to that, I think that Notre Dame has a better coach. I think they have a better quarterback. I think they have a better running back room. Indiana had the better receiving room, but I think other than that, where was Indiana
statistically better? At least. Obviously, it still needs some work, and they've already snagged a couple guys from the portal, one from Tech and one from Wisconsin. Yes, teams that Notre Dame plays, they tend to have maybe 2 or 3 even receivers with like more catches than Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has really spread the ball around. I think Mitchell Evans statistically hasn't been productive as last year. I'd love to know a little bit more about that and why that is from the tight end position. But some of it is just the way they're trying to play. It's no, we're going to run the ball first. We're going to hit some passes that keep you honest. We're going to win the line of scrimmage. We're not trying to beat you 60-58. We're going to try to beat you 30-10. And we're going to be on defense, very efficient. And we're going to get our creativity in, by the way, on special teams. And they did in that game. They ran a reverse on kickoff return that was successful. It got them to the other side of the 50. And they ran that weird 2-point conversion that was going to work, but Cignetti called timeout. So, yeah, I think some of the receiver stuff is about personnel, but I think some of it is also just about the way they're trying to play.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And I also think hasn't been talked about a lot, I don't think, from what I follow on Notre Dame, is the fact that Riley Leonard missed all of spring as a transfer, missing spring camp. That makes a huge difference with getting on the same page with your receivers. So I think that's a part of it. And you've seen steadily throughout the season, they've improved, and Leonard has definitely improved with his accuracy. So I think that makes a big difference too. But you mentioned coaching. I think that was one area where I was a little concerned about, because in the past, Notre Dame has not done very well in postseason. But I thought Marcus Freeman definitely outcoached Cignetti and just did a phenomenal job. And especially with Cignetti coming out with all his banter pregame about destroying top 25 teams. Yeah, I think that was pretty dumb. But I was happy to see Coach Freeman get that win. I think in year 3, he really seems to be hitting his stride and knowing how to motivate his team and prepare his team. I think the NIU game obviously was a huge loss, but I think it actually galvanized this team, and I think it's been really good for them overall.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And of course, to the point about the quarterback, Freeman has been clear just this week that they're not going to pursue a quarterback out of the portal, which I think I like for now, although Jett is stewing over there. I'm thinking you have some thoughts, which I'll let you share in a moment. But the reason I like it is because I think they have talent in the room. I think they've got experience in the room. It does make me wonder what they're thinking in terms of pecking order. Part of me thinks it will be Angeli or it will be Carr. I certainly hope that Minchie is right in that group and competing with the other two. And maybe and hopefully even they don't even know who it's going to be as of right now. And they'll have a much better sense from the spring. But Jett, what were you thinking, if anything, over there about the announcement that they weren't going to take somebody out of the portal?
I like it personally. For me, there's been a lot of bad quarterback play at Notre Dame. And then when we went to the portal to get Hartman, and it didn't work out. You had Drew Pine the year before that. So it feels like there's really been a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position since Ian Book has left. I like finding it in-house, and I think there's a lot of talent there. I like Steve Angeli a lot. I think CJ Carr is probably the future of the quarterback position at Notre Dame. I think Kenny Minchie plays football the way that Notre Dame wants you to play football at the quarterback position. I think Minchie and Love would work together phenomenally, and even Jadarian Price.
It's crazy that we get to have Love back. Because in my mind, I'm just like, he's been so good, like he's going to leave, but he can't leave yet. He's got to play another season.
Thankfully.
I think that's awesome. And so I think that's going to be a big factor is who plays better with Jeremiah Love, who's going to be able to get him going, because Love is going to be a guy that's competing for a Heisman Trophy next season. And I would fully expect Mike Denbrock and that Notre Dame offense to really lean into that. I think it'll come down to CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie. I do think Steve Angeli is very good. I just think that Freeman and company will maybe lean towards the future and getting a year under Carr or Minchie's belt, whoever they decide to go with. I hope Angeli stays. In fact, I hope that Carr or Minchie, I hope all three of them stay. I think all three of them are very good quarterbacks. Angeli staying this year surprised me. I still don't think he'll get the starting nod.
Surprised me too.
I saw Colin Cowherd even say that they're going to go get a quarterback, and it's just not happening. It's going to be one of the three that are already in the quarterback room now.
And if you can keep all three of those guys, and again, I think that speaks so much to culture, because at a lot of places right now, there's no way in heck that you would keep those three guys without guarantees. And I think it's been telling even right now that like most programs, even the ones that are playing right now, have guys in the portal, and Notre Dame doesn't. Now there's one big exception, which was announced earlier in the season, which is Jaden Mickey. Just, I think, signed with Cal, but we knew that was coming. And I'm just as interested to see the running back position, because you've got two guys who've been extremely productive. You've got a third guy who was weirdly on the field a ton in that game, in my opinion, talking about Aeneas Williams. And then you've got Jabron Payne, who showed some real flashes in the past, and he got hurt before the season, so he hasn't done anything, but presumably he'll be back. So you've got four guys who are experienced and talented if you can keep all four, and there's no guarantee that they'll keep all four. But yeah, really interested to see what happens at that position. Okay, portal stuff is happening. Notre Dame beats IU in round one. And by the way, to your point about coaching, Jeremy, I thought that Cignetti did coach scared in that game. And again, I like him and I like his brashness, bringing that to IU. And I'm not even talking, I saw he got a lot of flack for punting in the fourth quarter at one point. And that didn't even register for me. I didn't even barely notice that. What I did notice is that he had some shots early in the game where I felt like it was borderline. It seemed like he was playing not to get blown out. But I also saw his press conference, and just by his demeanor, I could tell that he knew they had their work cut out for him. Like, he did not seem like he was going to make outlandish promises during that press conference. And then he did get a little silly during ESPN Game Day, but he did not do that in the press conference. Okay, so this week, a much different story. You've got a Georgia team that won the SEC championship, beat Texas twice. They lost to Alabama, but they looked electric in the second half and trying to engineer a comeback. They had some games that they didn't look great. Kentucky, Georgia Tech. They are engineering a quarterback change at the moment. Gunnar Stockton's going to be the guy because Carson Beck got hurt in the SEC championship. He's also declared for the NFL draft. So I'm not quite sure what to expect from this Georgia team. I do think it'll be a grinded out defensive, physical type of game. I would be surprised if it was much of a high scoring shootout, but you never know. But yeah, what do you guys expect to see from Georgia? And of course, if they're missing their starting quarterback, Notre Dame will be without their best pass rusher in Rylie Mills. And that will be a big deal because they were already a bit thin there, in my opinion. They lost 2 Vipers early in the season. So that's, Heinisch has gotten some experience at tackle when Howard Cross was out for a few games. So I expect Heinisch to play a big role in trying to replace Mills, although he won't be the only one that'll get rotated out there. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts or level of optimism going into Georgia?
I was just going to say that when I first watched the injury happen and then seeing everything come out, Freeman had said on ESPN in the post game that they were optimistic about it. So I was thinking, okay, maybe it's not that bad. Then it comes out he's out for the year. And I was very worried. I was very concerned. But Bryce Young also went out in that Indiana game. And seeing that he will be back for the Georgia game, that got me, I'm not going to say I'm not worried about it at all. But I think Bryce Young's going to have a big breakout game. I'm a big Bryce Young believer. I think he is a freak of nature athlete. He's out of this world. But Gabriel Rubio as well on the defensive line, they have guys that can go and make plays on the football. And so I think that when you have a defensive coordinator like Al Golden, you understand these things are going to happen and you scheme for it. And I think that's exactly what Golden and the defense are going to do. I'm sure that Saturday after the Indiana game that this was already being discussed. And I think they will adjust just fine. I don't think it'll necessarily be that big of an issue.
The argument that you're making, Notre Dame, this particular team does so many things by committee, whether that's receiver play, whether that's running back play, whether that's defensive line play. They've shuffled guys around on the offensive line. And not to say that you've never seen the effects or the consequences of that, but the glaring gap or weakness just hasn't shown up, other than maybe like we don't have a scary deep threat throwing the football. But that's been like all year long. It hasn't been like someone got hurt and therefore we didn't throw the ball deep very much. It was, again, I think it has a lot to do with style. Maybe it's paranoia, but I'm a little bit more concerned, I think, than you are, Jed, about the defensive line. But yeah, Jeremy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm the same with you, Chris. I think getting pressure is going to be a huge factor, especially with a quarterback that is making his first start. Especially pressure up the middle can just make a huge difference, and being able to get that pressure, maybe cause a few turnovers, could be the difference in this game. I do think something that's unique about this team that we haven't had in the past with Notre Dame teams, at least for a while, is that just the amount of depth that we've had with Benjamin Morrison going out and Leonard Moore stepping in and just being phenomenal as a true freshman. I think that speaks to the recruiting. It speaks to the coaching, being able to identify talent, because this isn't a bunch of 5 stars. It's not a number 1 class that Freeman has been getting every year, but I think they really have an eye for talent, and it really shows this year. And that's, I think, going to be a huge factor in this game, because especially on the D line, they've lost, as you mentioned, their 2 starting defensive ends, their best pass rusher in the interior, but they got some great players. I'm big on Young as well. I just wonder, they've lost so many players. Eventually, that's my biggest concern, is that are they going to be able to, with a team that is going to, with IU, they outmatch them athletically and talent-wise, but that's not the case with Georgia.
They're going to have to do some stuff with blitzes, which Golden does already. This Georgia team, I was looking today, I think they've given up the 8th fewest sacks as it is in the country. So it's not a team that gets sacked very much already. In this particular situation, while you're breaking in a new quarterback, and Gunnar Stockton, like Angeli, has a pretty high completion percentage for a backup quarterback. But, and I think this is a little bit different from Angeli, like his average yards per catch or reception is not very high at all. So he's comfortable at this stage of kind of hitting the check down and short passes. They're going to have to do more than that, I think, to beat Notre Dame. But I will say they also don't necessarily have to sack Stockton in order to rattle the heck out of him. I think that's going to be the key, or the indicator to watch for is, are they getting pressure on? Who cares if they put him on the ground, honestly? Are they messing with his head is the real question.
Yeah, can they stop the run and force them to throw? Because Texas's secondary is really good, but I think Notre Dame's is even better. And they have some ball hawks as the safeties. I think the turnover battle is going to be key in this game. It is in every football game, but if we can cause a few turnovers, it's going to might be the difference in the game.
They, like Notre Dame, have a strong 1-2 punch at running back, so I'm sure they will try to live there to the extent that they can. I do think Mills is more of a pass rusher than he is a run stopper. So I don't necessarily think the lack of his presence is going to be a huge factor in the run game. I think it's going to be a bigger factor in the pass game. Jett, I think you were trying to say something as well.
No, I think that, like you said, it's make him move. If you can get Stockton on the move a little bit, you can get him uncomfortable. Yeah, just don't let him get comfortable. Get him on the run, get him scrambling, get him scared. It's going to be his first start at Georgia. It's not going to be great when you have guys like Howard Cross and Bryce Young chasing after you in your first start. And I think mentally that can get to a guy like Stockton very quickly. And I think when you were struggling mentally against Notre Dame in the past game, bad things are going to happen. And I can see that being the cause of a couple interceptions, maybe.
I think your point about interceptions is right. Like, for this to be a success for Notre Dame, again, I don't think you need 4 sacks, but 1 or 2 interceptions could be just as good as 4 sacks, particularly if you get them in the right spots in the game. Another thing I want to talk to you guys about while I've got you here, I won't keep you too much longer, but Notre Dame, I would say in the last decade, has been a good college football team with 1 or 2 exceptions. I will also say they've struggled to make the leap from good to great. And I do think there are some indications that this team is a little bit different from some of the teams that have had a lot of success recently at Notre Dame, but fallen short the playoff kind of stage, or even the New Year's Day Bowl kinds of contests. But yeah, what do you think? Let's say Notre Dame was able to win this game. I don't think we saw what the national media did when they beat IU. It was just, IU was not good and they didn't belong anyway, which we could have scripted that. Of course, that's what would be said afterwards. But I think this is a different scenario, right? This is SEC. This is a team that's won recent national championships. This is a team that beat Texas twice. This is second round of the playoffs. What would it mean for Notre Dame to actually win this game if it happens? And I don't think we're saying it's going to. But yeah, what would it mean?
To your point about the IU and SMU talk, you notice that all that talk about who deserved to be in got a lot quieter after Tennessee got blown.
Oh, did they not care that Tennessee got shit beat out of them? Really,
but anyways,
stop.
Yeah, Notre Dame's. I think they've been a really solid team since the last 10 years, but they haven't really reached that elite status. And I think now if they do win this game, I think you can start talking about them as being close to one of those elite programs like the Ohio State, the Alabamas, the Clemsons. It's a big opportunity for Notre Dame. And I think it's going to be a grinded out game. Every game that we played with Georgia has been really close. I thought we were in it the last 2 times we played with less talent. And I don't think this team is as talented as some of the previous teams Georgia has had in the playoffs recently. So I definitely think it's Notre Dame. This is probably Notre Dame's best opportunity for a national championship since I can remember.
This is one of these years where, and I think that you can say what you will about NIL and the transfer portal, but it's made the sport a lot more even, in my opinion. I think you saw last year where it was really, there were a lot of undefeated teams. This year, there's only one. And I think that team, being Oregon, I think that they're also very beatable. So as far as the best time to do it, I think Notre Dame's had the best team they've had since 2012. There can be conversations about if they're better or not. I think this is the best opportunity they've had to win a national championship since I've been a fan. I don't want to say too much. I'm very superstitious. I don't want to jinx anything. But this win would be the biggest win that I've probably ever experienced as a fan, just because of how many times they've had the opportunity to get over the hump and just can't do it. And this is really Freeman's first opportunity, I think. Obviously, you had the Ohio State games, but those were in his first 2 seasons of coaching. A&M, I think, was an opportunity, and he did it, but then the loss the week after set you right back. I think if he goes out and wins
over time, that A&M, they were okay. They were better than average, but they weren't great. They lost.
Right.
They had a decent lead on USC and lost in the bowl game to, I think it was a big win at that time, but it just wasn't this kind of thing where it's Georgia, where it's second round of the playoffs. I'll also say, I don't think they need to win the national championship to be able to say we need that next step. It'd be cool if Notre Dame won the national championship, but they don't need to win the national championship. I think if they beat Georgia and lost to Penn State or Boise, you'd still say this is an enormously successful season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's it then. Maybe we'll leave it right there. Jeremy and Jett, thank you guys so much. I'll have to get you back on another time. In the meantime, this has been another episode of the Rudy's Bench podcast. We care about the wins and losses, and we're also interested in the role that sports play in our lives.